Wealth inequality is escalating at an alarming rate worldwide, with the US reportedly having the highest levels of wealth inequality amongst developed nations. But this isn't just an American issue, it's a global crisis spreading across countries as diverse as Russia, India, and Brazil. To put it another way, as of 2010, 388 individuals possessed as much household wealth as the lower half of the world's population combined, about 3.5 billion people. Today, Oxfam estimates that number as 26. Statistics from almost all nations that measure wealth in their household surveys indicate that it is becoming increasingly concentrated. Currently, nearly half of the world's wealth is in the hands of just 1.2% of people, approximately 62.5 million adults, each having a net worth exceeding $1 million. Meanwhile, more than half of the global adult population, about 2.8 billion adults, have a net worth less than $10,000, underscoring the vast wealth inequality. One contributing factor to this issue is the global debt amounting to $300 trillion. While this debt wasn't a significant concern to most economists until recently, it's now being closely examined due to its potential effects on inequality. To address these issues, we need to understand the economic forces driving inequality, the relationship between global debt and this problem, and identify the optimal level of inequality to ensure prosperity for all. About 15 years ago, global income inequality began to decline for the first time since the Industrial Revolution, despite the popular notion of growing inequality. This reduction in global inequality was largely due to economic growth in previously poor but populous countries, mainly China, but also Indonesia, India, Thailand, the Philippines, South Korea, and Taiwan. These nations, representing close to half the world's population, have significantly grown their economies over the past 50 years, lifting billions out of extreme poverty and reducing the income gap with the world's wealthiest. However, while global inequality was falling due to the economic rise of these countries, income inequality within these same countries was rising. For instance, during China's period of rapid economic growth, its income inequality increased significantly. China's increase in internal income inequality while contributing to a decrease in global inequality is not unique. Most major economies that have seen high levels of growth in the past half-century have experienced increased internal inequality. Thus, the narrative of global inequality is complicated. Countries that have increased their internal inequality through rapid economic growth have paradoxically contributed to a decrease in global inequality. In the past, the wealth of nations largely depended on the productivity of their farmland. Some countries extended their reach by colonizing others and extracting resources, but generally people were equally poor. The main form of wealth was land ownership for food production, as feeding oneself was a primary concern for most individuals. Industrial and technological advancements like railroads, steam engines, production lines, and later electricity created a significant divide between countries that adopted these technologies and those that didn't. Today, agriculture is a small part of the global economy, with industrialization and globalization making it easier for countries to develop. Inequality is a complex issue. It can be reduced either by making wealthy people poorer or poor people richer. Ideally, the economic goal is to make the poor richer. However, this can sometimes result in already wealthy people becoming wealthier, giving the illusion that inequality is worsening, even as life improves for everyone. As long as a person's wealth comes from adding value to the economy rather than extracting value from it, it should theoretically make the world a better place. However, this is an oversimplification, and global macroeconomic factors can influence this dynamic. Even if overall inequality is beneficial, it can still cause unavoidable issues. Many people argue that when the world's wealthiest individuals spend lavishly, this spending, rather than hoarding, is beneficial for the economy. This idea is rooted in the fact that the money spent trickles down to several other people involved in the supply chain. For example, if a billionaire buys a private jet, the money spent will indirectly be transferred to the thousands of people involved in the production and maintenance of the plane. This not only boosts industry and employment, but also improves the overall output in the economy. This spending is often seen as beneficial since consumer spending is a significant component of GDP, and an increase in consumer spending leads to an increase in economic output. This consistent increase is a catalyst for economic growth. However, it's important to note that most people may be looking at this process backward. The reason consumption is used to measure economic output is that it's easier to collect data on than production itself. While during economic downturns, economists often express concern over consumer confidence and spending, it doesn't necessarily mean that consumption always leads to the best economic outcomes for everyone. This is especially true when consumption is heavily concentrated among the wealthy. which can potentially lead to economic problems. Not to mention social and environmental issues associated with a heavily consumption-focused society. If, for instance, a billionaire invested in a factory instead of buying a private jet, that investment would create jobs and boost economic growth. Additionally, rather than simply consuming wealth, the investment would add value to the global economy by creating more valuable outputs from inputs. While the circulation of money through the economy is beneficial and consumption is a quick way to achieve this, it is better in the long term for both resources and money to circulate, thereby improving both present and future output. Despite this, a concentration of wealth, even if invested, can still cause problems, especially when these investments contribute to global debt. Currently, global debt is at a record high, exceeding $300 trillion. While this is a massive figure, it's not automatically problematic. This is because each dollar of debt corresponds to an equally valuable receivable asset somewhere else in the world. The issue lies in the distribution of this debt and the assets that back it. Only about 5% of worldwide debt is held by governments and non-governmental organizations like the World Bank and the IMF. China is the biggest debt-holding government due to its vast foreign reserves and involvement in lending for initiatives like the Belt and Road Project. The remaining 95% of global debt is held directly or indirectly by households. Debt availability and access to loans play an integral part in the economy. This is because there are numerous projects and technologies that have the potential to provide significant value to the economy, but require vast amounts of capital to develop. Many countries, particularly those with rich natural resources or skilled labor forces, are unable to fully realize their economic potential due to limited access to capital. This barrier prevents them from developing their industries to a globally competitive level. If debt is created effectively, meaning it is allocated towards worthy projects that provide a substantial return on investment, it doesn't pose a threat to the global economy. Ideally, there should be an intermediary that can effectively allocate resources and prevent wastage. The issue arises when lending decisions, which determine who gets access to this critical capital, are controlled by a small group of people. This can lead to good ideas not being funded. Economics, being a social science, is subject to different interpretations and perspectives. A certain level of inequality can motivate participants in the economy to innovate and work harder, which could lead to a better life for everyone. However, excessive inequality can be counterproductive. It could slow down projects and lead to the wastage of resources that could otherwise have been used to improve the global economic landscape. Understanding the intricacies of global debt and income inequality is crucial as they are interconnected. As nations and individuals grapple with debt, the wealthy often increase their wealth, exacerbating income inequality. As global debt continues to climb and wealth continues to be concentrated in the hands of the few, economists and policymakers must consider the long-term implications on the global economy and devise solutions to mitigate potential negative effects. The objective should be a sustainable and equitable economic model that serves the many, not just the few.